Daniel stood motionless in the darkness of the hallway, hidden just beyond the entrance to the living room. His heart pounded so loudly in his chest that for a moment he feared Sophia and Alex might hear it. But they didn't. They were too busy laughing, too busy celebrating the deception they believed had fooled him completely. The small recorder in Daniel's hand continued capturing every word, every lie, every betrayal. Daniel had spent his entire life making difficult decisions. In business, emotions were dangerous. Anger, pride, and fear could destroy years of hard work if they were allowed to control judgment. So Daniel did something most people in his situation would struggle to do. He remained silent. Instead of confronting them immediately, he listened. Daniel Carter was the kind of man whose name carried weight in every room it entered. In the world of business, he was known as a visionary, someone who could see opportunities where others only saw risk. By the time he was 35, Daniel had built an empire worth billions. His companies stretched across industries, technology, real estate, logistics, and finance. Newspapers called him a genius. Business magazines called him unstoppable. But Daniel never saw himself that way. To him, he was simply a man who refused to quit. Daniel wasn't born into wealth. In fact, his early life was the complete opposite of luxury. He grew up in a small apartment in a crowded neighborhood where opportunities were rare and dreams often felt unrealistic. His father worked long hours as a mechanic, and his mother sold food from a small stall to help support the family. Money was always tight. Daniel remembered nights when the electricity would go out because the bills couldn't be paid on time. He remembered watching his parents argue quietly about expenses when they thought he was asleep. But what he remembered most was his father's advice. "Son," his father used to say, "life will never hand you success. If you want something, you have to build it yourself." Those words stayed with Daniel long after his childhood ended. While other kids spent their free time playing games, Daniel spent hours reading books about business, economics, and successful entrepreneurs. He became fascinated with how companies grew and how powerful ideas could change the world. By the time he entered university, Daniel already had a clear vision of what he wanted. He didn't want to simply have a job. He wanted to create something. His first business was far from glamorous. It was a small online service he started from his dorm room using a second-hand laptop. Most people didn't take it seriously, and many of his classmates thought it would fail. But Daniel saw something others didn't. He saw potential. He worked late into the night, often surviving on little sleep and cheap food. Every small profit he made went straight back into growing the business. Months turned into years. Slowly, his idea started gaining attention. Investors noticed his determination. Customers appreciated the value his company provided. And before long, the small project he started in his dorm room began expanding faster than anyone expected. That was only the beginning. Over the next decade, Daniel launched several successful companies. Some focused on technology innovation, others on property development and investment. His ability to identify profitable opportunities made him one of the most respected entrepreneurs in the industry. By 35, Daniel Carter was a billionaire. His life looked like something out of a movie. He owned a luxurious mansion in the city, with glass walls that overlooked the skyline. His garage held some of the most expensive cars in the world. Private jets, elite business meetings, international travel. These things had become normal parts of his life. But despite all of it, Daniel never allowed wealth to change who he was. He remained disciplined, focused, and surprisingly humble. His employees respected him because he treated them fairly. His business partners trusted him because his word meant something. Yet, if there was one thing Daniel valued even more than success, it was family. Through all the pressure and responsibilities of building his empire, Daniel always believed that the true purpose of wealth was to create security and happiness for the people you loved. Two people stood at the center of that belief. The first was his wife, Sophia. Sophia had entered Daniel's life during one of the busiest periods of his career. They met at a charity event hosted by one of Daniel's companies. Unlike many people who approached him because of his status, Sophia seemed uninterested in his wealth. She spoke to him casually, almost as if she didn't care that he was one of the richest men in the room. That caught Daniel's attention immediately. Sophia was intelligent, charming, and confident. She had a natural warmth that made people feel comfortable around her. When she laughed, the entire room seemed to brighten. For Daniel, who was constantly surrounded by business negotiations and strategic decisions, Sophia felt like peace. Their relationship moved quickly. Within a year, they were married in a beautiful ceremony attended by family, friends, and some of the most influential figures in the business world. Sophia often told Daniel that she admired his hard work and dedication. She said she loved the man he was, not the money he had. Daniel believed her completely. The second person Daniel trusted deeply was his younger brother, Alex. Growing up, Daniel had always felt responsible for Alex. Their childhood had been difficult, and Daniel often took on the role of protector. While Daniel focused on building his businesses, Alex followed a different path. He wasn't as interested in entrepreneurship, but he had a friendly personality that made him good with people. When Daniel's companies began expanding, he offered Alex a position in one of his firms. It wasn't because Alex asked for it. It was because Daniel wanted his brother to have opportunities he never had growing up. Alex appreciated it, or at least that's what Daniel believed. Over time, Alex became a familiar presence in Daniel's life. He attended family gatherings, company events, and sometimes even helped manage smaller projects within Daniel's business network. To Daniel, Alex wasn't just an employee. He was family. And family, in Daniel's mind, meant loyalty. For many years, Daniel felt fortunate. He had built an empire from nothing. He had married a woman he believed truly loved him. And he had a brother who stood beside him through the journey. From the outside, Daniel Carter's life looked perfect. But life has a strange way of testing the things we trust most. Sometimes, the people we believe are closest to us carry secrets we cannot see. And sometimes, betrayal hides behind smiles and kind words. Daniel had no idea that everything he believed about loyalty, love, and family was about to be shattered. Because the greatest test of his life was coming, and it would begin with a single, unexpected moment that would change everything forever. For years, Daniel Carter's life moved with the precision of a well-designed machine. Every day followed a structured rhythm. Early morning meetings, strategic planning sessions, international calls, and constant decisions that shaped the future of his companies. Success had become routine. But one thing Daniel never allowed success to steal from him was discipline. No matter how busy he was, he always made time to review his businesses personally. He believed that true leaders never became too comfortable. That belief was what placed him on the road the night everything changed. It was late in the evening after a long board meeting with investors from overseas. The meeting had lasted far longer than expected, and Daniel's team suggested he stay the night in the company's executive suite. But Daniel insisted on going home. Home meant Sophia. No matter how busy his schedule became, Daniel always tried to return home at night. It was one of the few things that helped him separate the chaos of business from the peace of his personal life. The city lights shimmered outside as Daniel drove through the quiet streets. The roads were nearly empty, and a cool breeze carried the calm silence that often follows midnight. Inside the car, Daniel felt unusually tired. He loosened his tie slightly and leaned back against the seat while the car moved smoothly through the highway. For a brief moment, his mind drifted away from business. He thought about Sophia. Earlier that evening, she had sent him a message asking when he would return home. She said she had been waiting all night for him. Daniel smiled slightly at the thought. Even after years of marriage, he still appreciated small moments like that. But within seconds, everything changed. A pair of bright headlights suddenly appeared from the opposite direction. They were moving far too fast. Daniel barely had time to react before the sound of screeching tires shattered the silence of the road. Then came the impact. Metal collided with metal in a violent crash that echoed through the empty highway. Daniel's car spun out of control. Glass shattered. The world around him blurred into decay. For a moment, everything became silent. Then darkness. When Daniel slowly regained consciousness, he felt a heavy pressure in his head. The first thing he noticed was the sound of machines. Soft beeping noises echoed around him. Voices spoke somewhere nearby, but they sounded distant and unclear. Daniel tried to open his eyes. But something was wrong. Everything was dark. Not the normal darkness of night. This was different. It was complete. Total. Endless. Panic began to rise inside his chest. He tried again. Still nothing. Daniel attempted to move his hands, and he felt the stiffness of medical tubes attached to his body. Then he heard a familiar voice. Daniel. Daniel, can you hear me? It was Sophia. Her voice trembled slightly as if she had been crying. Daniel struggled to speak. Sophia? Yes, I'm here, she said quickly. I'm right here. Daniel felt her hand hold his, but something inside him felt terribly wrong. Why can't I see? He asked slowly. The room fell silent. No one answered immediately. Daniel could sense the tension in the air. Then another voice spoke. Calm. Professional. It was a doctor. Mr. Carter, the doctor said gently, you were involved in a serious accident last night. You suffered a significant head injury. Daniel's heart began to beat faster. What does that mean? He asked. The doctor hesitated. Then he said the words that would change Daniel's life. The trauma affected your optic nerves. At the moment, you have lost your eyesight. The sentence hit Daniel like another crash, lost his eyesight. Daniel sat in silence as the words repeated in his mind. He had faced business failures before. He had dealt with difficult competitors and economic crises. But nothing had ever prepared him for this. Blindness. For the first time in many years, Daniel Carter felt completely helpless. Sophia squeezed his hand tighter. Don't worry, she whispered softly. Everything will be okay. I'm here. Her voice sounded sincere, comforting. Daniel tried to focus on her words. He needed something to hold on to. The doctor continued explaining the situation. There is a chance your vision could return with treatment, the doctor said, but we cannot guarantee anything yet. Recovery from injuries like this can take time. Time. Daniel had built his life on control, planning, and vision, both literally and figuratively. Now, the one thing he had always relied on most had been taken away. The following days felt like a blur. Daniel remained in the hospital while doctors monitored his condition. He slowly began adjusting to the strange reality of darkness. At first, even the simplest actions felt impossible. Walking required assistance. Eating required guidance. Every movement felt uncertain. But through it all, Sophia remained by his side. She helped him sit up. She fed him when his hands trembled. She reassured him constantly that she would never leave. I'll take care of everything, she promised one evening while sitting beside his bed. You just focus on getting better. Daniel felt grateful. Not everyone was lucky enough to have someone so devoted. A few days later, another familiar voice entered the hospital room. Big brother? Daniel turned his head toward the sound. Alex? Yes, his younger brother replied. Alex's voice carried a mixture of concern and nervous energy. I came as soon as I heard about the accident. Daniel felt Alex place a hand on his shoulder. Don't worry, Alex said. I'll help you with the business while you recover. Daniel nodded slowly. That offer brought him relief. Running multiple companies required constant decisions. Without his direct involvement, things could easily become chaotic. But Alex had always been loyal. Daniel trusted him. Thank you, Daniel said quietly. It's the least I can do, Alex replied. From that moment forward, Alex began stepping into a larger role in Daniel's companies. He attended meetings, handled urgent decisions, spoke with managers and investors. Meanwhile, Sophia focused on helping Daniel adjust to life without sight. Eventually, doctors allowed Daniel to return home. The mansion he once knew so well suddenly felt unfamiliar. Sophia guided him carefully through the hallways, reminding him where furniture and stairs were located. "You'll get used to it," she said gently. Daniel tried to remain positive, but deep inside, he felt a growing fear. What if his vision never returned? What if this darkness became permanent? For the first time since building his empire, Daniel Carter was no longer in control of his life. But despite the uncertainty, he still believed one thing strongly. He believed he was surrounded by people who loved him. His wife, his brother, the two people he trusted most in the world. What Daniel didn't know was that the accident had done something unexpected. It had created a situation where people believed he could no longer see. And when people believe no one is watching, they often reveal their true selves. Returning home should have felt comforting. For Daniel Carter, home had always been a place of control and familiarity. Every corner of the mansion had once been mapped perfectly in his mind. The polished marble floors, the tall glass windows overlooking the city skyline, the quiet elegance of the living room where he and Sophia used to drink coffee in the mornings. But now, everything felt different. Without his eyesight, the house that once felt like a palace now felt like a maze. Daniel had to relearn everything. Sophia guided him carefully through the hallways during the first few days. She would hold his arm and gently describe the surroundings as they walked. 3 steps forward, she would say softly. There's a table on your left. Now a small step down. Daniel listened carefully, trying to memorize the layout again using sound, touch, and memory. It was frustrating at first. The simplest movements required focus. A man who once commanded global companies now needed help just to walk across his own living room. Still, Daniel refused to allow despair to control him. He reminded himself that many people lived full lives without sight. If they could adapt, so could he. And for the first week, things seemed manageable. Sophia was incredibly attentive. She helped him dress in the morning, prepared his meals, and patiently guided him whenever he needed to move around the house. Her voice remained gentle and supportive. "You're doing great," she told him one afternoon while helping him practice walking with a cane. "You'll adjust faster than you think." Daniel appreciated her encouragement. It gave him strength during moments when frustration tried to take over. Alex also began visiting the mansion more frequently. At first, Daniel assumed it was simply because his brother was helping manage the companies while he recovered. Alex would often update him about business matters. "The investors' meeting went well," Alex said during one visit. "The logistics division signed the new contract." Daniel listened carefully as Alex spoke. Even though he could no longer see documents or charts, his mind remained sharp. He asked questions, reviewed decisions, made suggestions. Alex seemed eager to prove that he could handle the responsibility. "I've got things under control," Alex would say confidently. Daniel trusted him. After all, Alex was family. But as the days turned into weeks, something subtle began to change inside the house. At first, Daniel couldn't explain it. It was just a feeling. Small things began to feel off. Sophia was still kind during the day, but sometimes her patience seemed thinner than before. One morning, Daniel accidentally knocked over a glass while reaching for the kitchen counter. The sound of shattering glass echoed through the room. "I'm sorry," Daniel said immediately. But instead of her usual comforting tone, Sophia let out a small sigh. "You have to be more careful, Daniel," she said, sounding slightly irritated. "I'm trying," he replied quietly. The moment passed quickly, and Sophia returned to her normal tone shortly after. But the change didn't go unnoticed. Daniel began paying attention to details more closely. Without sight, his other senses had become sharper. He noticed the tone in people's voices, the rhythm of footsteps, the quiet sounds others ignored. And slowly, he began noticing patterns. Alex's visits were becoming more frequent. Sometimes he would arrive during the day. Other times he came late in the evening. Daniel didn't question it at first. After all, Alex was managing parts of the business now. But then there were the whispers. Late at night, when the house should have been silent, Daniel occasionally heard quiet voices somewhere in the distance. At first he assumed it was the staff. The mansion was large and several employees worked there during the day. But the voices didn't sound like the staff. They sounded familiar. One night, Daniel lay in bed, unable to sleep. The house was quiet. Sophia had told him she was going downstairs to take a phone call. Daniel listened to the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. Then he heard footsteps. Soft ones, followed by another pair. Then came a faint sound of laughter. Daniel sat up slowly in the bed. He tried to focus on the direction of the sound. It was coming from somewhere downstairs. For a moment, Daniel considered calling out, but something stopped him. Instead, he remained silent and listened. The voices were too quiet to understand clearly. But one thing stood out. The voices sounded relaxed, comfortable, almost playful. Eventually, the voices faded and the house returned to silence. A few minutes later, Sophia returned to the bedroom. "Sorry," she said casually. "It was just a long phone call." Daniel nodded, but inside, a small seed of doubt had begun to grow. The next few days only made that feeling stronger. Sometimes Sophia would leave the room for long periods without explaining why. Sometimes Alex would visit unexpectedly, even when there was no business reason for him to be there. And occasionally, Daniel noticed a strange tension in the air when the two of them were near each other. One afternoon, Daniel sat quietly in the living room while Sophia and Alex talked in the kitchen. They thought he couldn't hear them clearly from that distance, but Daniel's hearing had become sharper than ever. He couldn't make out every word, but he heard something that made his heart pause. A quiet laugh. Then Sophia's voice saying softly, "Be careful." Daniel's mind began racing with questions. Why did she sound nervous? Why were they whispering? He pushed the thoughts away. No, that couldn't be it. Sophia loved him. Alex was his brother. The two people he trusted most in the world would never betray him. Still, the strange feeling wouldn't disappear. Late that night, Daniel lay awake again. The house had gone quiet. Sophia slept beside him. But Daniel couldn't shake the uneasy thought forming in his mind. Sometimes life changes not with a dramatic moment, but with small signs, small details, small shifts in behavior. And Daniel was beginning to realize something important. When people believe you cannot see, they begin to act differently. They begin to reveal parts of themselves they normally hide. Daniel didn't know it yet, but the darkness surrounding him was about to reveal a truth far more painful than blindness, because somewhere inside his own home, a secret was growing. And very soon, that secret would destroy everything he believed about love, loyalty, and family. By the third week after the accident, Daniel Carter had begun to adjust to the darkness that surrounded him. Not completely. No one truly adjusts to losing their sight so quickly. But Daniel had always been someone who adapted faster than most people. Throughout his life, every challenge had forced him to sharpen a different skill. When money was scarce, he learned discipline. When business competition became fierce, he learned strategy. Now that he could no longer rely on sight, his mind began strengthening his other senses. His hearing became sharper, his memory more precise. Even the smallest changes in tone or movement no longer escaped his attention. And that was when the strange feeling he had been ignoring began turning into suspicion. The mansion, which had once been full of comfortable silence, now carried unfamiliar sounds. Footsteps in the late evening, soft voices in distant rooms, doors closing quietly. At first, Daniel convinced himself it was nothing. A large house always had movement. Staff members occasionally worked late. Alex often visited for business updates. Sophia sometimes stayed up late making calls. All of it seemed reasonable. But something about the atmosphere in the house felt wrong. It wasn't just the sounds. It was the energy. There was a kind of tension in the air, like something hidden just beneath the surface. and Daniel could feel it. One evening, after dinner, Sophia helped Daniel walk back to the bedroom. "You should rest," she told him gently. "The doctor said you shouldn't push yourself too much." Daniel nodded. "I will," he replied calmly. Sophia helped him sit on the bed before leaving the room to bring him water. Daniel sat quietly, listening to the soft hum of the air conditioner. A moment later, he heard Sophia's footsteps again, but instead of returning to the bedroom, the sound of her heels moved down the hallway, then toward the stairs, then downstairs. Daniel frowned slightly. Maybe she had forgotten something. But minutes passed. Then more minutes. The house remained quiet. Daniel reached for the glass of water on the bedside table and took a slow sip. Something inside him felt restless, that strange feeling again. He placed the glass down and leaned his head back against the bed. Then he heard it. Footsteps. Not just one pair. Two. They came from downstairs. Then came voices. Low. Careful. As if someone was trying not to be heard. Daniel's heart began beating faster. For several seconds he remained completely still. Listening. Trying to recognize the voices. Then he heard it clearly. Sophia. And another voice. A male voice. Daniel didn't want to believe it, but he recognized it instantly. Alex, his younger brother. Daniel's fingers slowly tightened around the edge of the mattress. What were they doing downstairs together this late? Perhaps they were discussing business. That would make sense. But something about the tone of their voices didn't sound like a business conversation. They sounded relaxed, comfortable, almost playful. Daniel swung his legs slowly off the bed. Carefully, quietly. He stood up and reached for the walking cane near the bedside. Every movement had to be silent. He stepped slowly toward the door, making sure the cane didn't tap the floor. When he reached the hallway, the voices became clearer. They were coming from the living room. Daniel moved carefully along the wall, using his hand to guide himself. Each step felt heavier than the last. Part of him wanted to stop, to go back to bed, to pretend nothing was happening. But another part of him needed to know the truth. As he reached the staircase, the voices became even clearer. Sophia was laughing. It wasn't the soft, comforting laugh she used around Daniel. This laugh sounded different. Free. Careless. Daniel slowly made his way down the stairs, one step at a time. His heart pounded in his chest. When he reached the bottom, he stopped near the hallway entrance to the living room. He stayed hidden behind the wall. The voices were only a few feet away now. Then Sophia spoke. "You worry too much," she said quietly. Daniel's breath froze. Alex responded with a low chuckle. "We have to be careful," Alex replied. "If Daniel finds out—" Sophia interrupted him. "Daniel can't find out anything," she said. "He's blind." Daniel felt a sharp pain in his chest. Her words were calm, cold, as if she were discussing a simple fact rather than the life of her husband. Alex laughed softly. "You're right," he said. "Sometimes I forget how easy this has become." Daniel's hand tightened against the wall beside him. His mind struggled to process what he was hearing. Then Sophia said something that shattered the last piece of hope in his heart. "I never loved Daniel," she admitted casually. Daniel felt as if the ground beneath him had disappeared. "I only married him because he was rich," she continued. Alex remained silent for a moment. Then he said quietly, "And now?" Sophia's voice lowered slightly. "Now things are even better." Daniel's heart pounded so loudly he was afraid they might hear it. Sophia continued speaking. "With Daniel blind, he depends on us for everything. That means we control everything." Alex chuckled again. "The companies, the investments, the properties." Sophia nodded. Exactly. Daniel felt his world collapsing piece by piece. The woman he believed loved him, the brother he trusted more than anyone. Both of them standing only a few feet away, laughing about how easily they had deceived him. Alex spoke again. "You know," he said, "sometimes I almost feel bad for him." Sophia scoffed. "Don't. He built his fortune. We're just making sure we enjoy it." The two of them laughed quietly. Daniel's body felt frozen. Every word they spoke cut deeper than the last. But something else began forming inside him. Not anger. Not yet. Something colder. Something more controlled. Understanding. Daniel slowly reached into his pocket. Earlier that day, one of his assistants had given him a small voice recorder so he could record business notes. His fingers quietly pressed the record button. The device began capturing every word. Sophia leaned closer to Alex. "You just have to keep acting like the caring brother," she said softly. "And I'll keep acting like the loving wife." Alex laughed. "It's almost too easy." Daniel stood there in silence, listening, recording, and realizing a painful truth. Blindness had taken his sight, but it had also revealed something far more valuable: the true faces of the people closest to him. And now that Daniel Carter knew the truth, everything was about to change. Daniel stood motionless in the darkness of the hallway, hidden just beyond the entrance to the living room. His heart pounded so loudly in his chest that for a moment he feared Sophia and Alex might hear it. But they didn't. They were too busy laughing, too busy celebrating the deception they believed had fooled him completely. The small recorder in Daniel's hand continued capturing every word, every lie, every betrayal. Daniel had spent his entire life making difficult decisions. In business, emotions were dangerous. Anger, pride, and fear could destroy years of hard work if they were allowed to control judgment. So Daniel did something most people in his situation would struggle to do. He remained silent. Instead of confronting them immediately, he listened. Alex poured a drink from the bar in the living room. Daniel recognized the sound of liquid filling a glass. "You know what the funniest part is?" Alex said with a chuckle. "What?" Sophia asked. "He still trusts us." Sophia laughed softly. "I know." Daniel's fingers tightened slightly around the recorder. Sophia continued speaking. "He actually believes we're helping him." "Well, technically we are," Alex replied jokingly. "Just not in the way he thinks." They both laughed again. Each laugh felt like a knife twisting deeper into Daniel's chest, but Daniel forced himself to stay calm. He had always believed that the strongest advantage in any situation was information, and tonight, information was exactly what he was gaining. Sophia took a sip from her glass before speaking again. "Honestly, when the accident happened, I thought everything was ruined." Alex sounded curious. "Why?" "Because Daniel used to control everything," she explained. "Every decision, every deal, every investment. There was no way we could ever take anything from him." She paused for a moment. "But now," Alex finished her sentence, "now he's helpless." Daniel closed his eyes as he listened. Helpless. That was how they saw him now. Sophia leaned back in her chair. "With him blind, the lawyers talk to us. The business managers talk to us. The bank representatives talk to us." Alex chuckled. "It's like we've already taken over." Daniel's breathing remained slow and controlled. Inside his mind, he was already analyzing everything. Every word Sophia and Alex spoke confirmed something important. They believed they had won. They believed Daniel was powerless, and that belief made them careless. Sophia continued talking. "In a few months, we'll start transferring some assets quietly," she said. "Nothing too obvious." Alex nodded. Small steps. Exactly, Sophia replied. By the time Daniel realizes anything is wrong, it'll be too late. Alex laughed again. But honestly, I don't think he'll ever realize. He can't even see where he's walking. Daniel felt a sharp pain in his chest, but he refused to let emotion control him. Instead, he focused on the sound of the recorder, still capturing everything. Then Alex said something that made Daniel's heart sink even deeper. You know, Alex said slowly, I always wondered why you chose him in the first place. Sophia responded without hesitation. Because he was rich. Alex laughed. That simple? Yes. Daniel felt the weight of her words pressing against him. Sophia continued calmly. Daniel was successful, powerful, respected. Marrying him gave me access to a life most people only dream about. She took another sip of her drink. But love? She added. That was never part of the deal. Daniel's hands trembled slightly. For years he had believed Sophia loved him. He remembered their wedding day, the promises, the smiles, the way she looked at him. Now he realized something painful. Every moment might have been a lie. Alex leaned forward. So you never cared about him at all? Sophia shrugged. I cared about what he could give me. Alex let out a low whistle. That's cold. Sophia laughed. Please, don't pretend you're any different. Alex smiled. You're right. Daniel's mind slowly accepted a truth he never wanted to face. The two people he had trusted most in the world had been deceiving him for years, and now they were planning to take everything he had built. The room fell quiet for a moment. Then Alex spoke again. Do you ever worry he might recover his sight? Sophia laughed dismissively. The doctors already said the damage was serious. But what if... Alex, she interrupted. Daniel Carter is finished. Her voice was calm, confident, cold. He's blind, he's dependent, and he trusts us completely. Daniel stood in silence as her words echoed through the room. Finished. That was what she believed. But Daniel Carter had built an empire by proving people wrong. And tonight was no different. He quietly stopped the recorder and slipped it back into his pocket. He had heard enough. Every lie, every plan, every betrayal. Now he had proof. But more importantly, he had clarity. For the first time since the accident, Daniel understood exactly what kind of game was being played. Sophia and Alex believed they were the ones in control. They believed they were slowly taking his power away. But what they didn't realize was something very simple. Daniel Carter was still the same man who had built billion-dollar companies from nothing. Blind or not, his mind remained sharper than ever. And if there was one thing Daniel understood better than anyone, it was strategy. He slowly turned away from the living room and quietly made his way back toward the staircase. Step by step. Carefully. Silently. Sophia and Alex continued talking behind him, completely unaware that their secret had already been exposed. When Daniel reached the bedroom, he sat down slowly on the bed. For several minutes, he said nothing. He simply sat there in the darkness, thinking, planning, processing everything he had just heard. His heart still felt heavy. The betrayal hurt more than he expected. But slowly that pain began transforming into something else, determination. Daniel reached into his pocket and touched the recorder again. Inside that small device was the truth, the evidence that would change everything. Sophia and Alex believed Daniel was weak. They believed blindness had made him powerless. But they had forgotten one important thing. Daniel Carter had never lost a battle without fighting. And now that he knew the truth, the real game was about to begin. The night Daniel discovered the truth changed everything. But what surprised him most was not the betrayal itself. It was how calm he felt afterward. For the rest of that night, Daniel lay in bed pretending to sleep, while Sophia moved quietly around the room. She eventually slipped under the covers beside him, acting like nothing had happened. Daniel said nothing. He simply listened to her breathing slowly fall into sleep. Inside his mind, however, everything was moving quickly. Daniel Carter had spent his entire life solving complex problems. Running billion-dollar companies required constant planning, patience, and the ability to think several steps ahead of everyone else. Now, those same skills would become his greatest weapon. Sophia and Alex believed he was powerless. They believed they controlled the situation, and that belief was exactly what Daniel intended to use against them. The next morning, Daniel behaved exactly the same as he had every day since the accident. He woke up slowly, allowed Sophia to guide him downstairs, and sat quietly at the breakfast table while she prepared coffee. Sophia sounded cheerful. "Good morning," she said sweetly. "Did you sleep well?" Daniel nodded calmly. "Yes." "Good," she replied. "You looked tired last night." Daniel could hear the faint clinking of cups as she placed coffee in front of him. Her voice sounded warm, caring. If Daniel had not heard the conversation the night before, he might have believed it was genuine. But now he understood something important. Some people are very good actors. A few minutes later, Alex arrived at the house. "Morning, big brother," Alex said casually as he entered the kitchen. Daniel turned his head toward the sound of his voice. "Morning." Alex pulled out a chair and sat down. "Just wanted to update you about the business," he said. "The logistics division is negotiating a new shipping contract." "It looks promising." Daniel listened carefully. He asked a few simple questions. Everything sounded completely normal. Alex spoke with confidence, as if nothing had changed, as if the conversation from the previous night had never happened. Daniel remained calm throughout the discussion. He thanked Alex for handling things while he recovered. "Of course," Alex said. "That's what family is for." Daniel almost smiled. Family. The word sounded very different now. Over the next few days, Daniel continued observing quietly. He noticed how comfortable Sophia and Alex had become. They spoke freely around him. Sometimes they whispered when they thought he couldn't hear. Other times they discussed business matters openly in front of him, assuming he could never understand the bigger picture anymore. But Daniel understood everything. And during those days, he began preparing his next move. First, he contacted his lawyer. Not directly. Instead, he used a trusted assistant who had worked with him for over 10 years. Daniel asked for a private meeting at the house. When the lawyer arrived 2 days later, Sophia welcomed him politely. "Daniel has been waiting for you," she said. She helped guide Daniel into the study where the lawyer sat across from him. Once the door closed, Daniel spoke quietly. "Everything I say in this room stays between us." The lawyer nodded. "Of course." Then Daniel did something that shocked him. He stood up from the chair and walked across the room, without assistance. The lawyer stared in confusion. "Mr. Carter?" Daniel spoke calmly. "I can see." The lawyer's eyes widened. "But the accident? My eyesight returned several days ago," Daniel explained. "I chose not to tell anyone." The lawyer looked stunned. "Why?" Daniel reached into his pocket and placed the recorder on the desk. "Because I needed to know the truth." He pressed play. The room filled with the voices of Sophia and Alex from that night. Their laughter, their plans, their betrayal. The lawyer listened silently as the recording continued. When it finished, the room fell quiet. Finally, the lawyer leaned back in his chair. "Well," he said slowly, "that explains everything." Daniel folded his hands calmly. "I want to handle this carefully." "What do you have in mind?" the lawyer asked. Daniel's voice remained steady. They believe I'm blind. The lawyer nodded. Yes. Daniel leaned forward slightly. Then we let them keep believing it. A slow smile formed on the lawyer's face. I see. Over the next few days, Daniel quietly made several changes. Legal documents were updated. Business authority was shifted. Ownership structures were reinforced. All without Sophia or Alex noticing. They believed Daniel was still completely dependent on them, and that belief made them careless. Finally, Daniel decided it was time. One morning, he asked Sophia to invite Alex for breakfast. I want to thank him properly for helping with the business, Daniel said. Sophia sounded pleased. I'm sure he'll appreciate that. Later that morning, Alex arrived. The three of them sat together at the dining table. Sophia poured coffee. Alex began discussing the business again. Things are going well, Alex said confidently. You don't need to worry about anything. Daniel nodded slowly. I'm glad to hear that. For a moment, the room felt completely normal. Then Daniel spoke again. I have something to show both of you. Sophia sounded curious. What is it? Daniel pushed his chair back. Then he did something neither of them expected. He stood up and walked across the dining room, without touching the table, without using a cane, without assistance. Sophia's voice froze. Daniel? Alex's chair scraped loudly against the floor. Daniel turned toward them calmly. His eyes met theirs. Fully focused. Fully aware. I guess, Daniel said quietly. You both forgot something. The room felt frozen. Neither Sophia nor Alex spoke. Daniel reached into his pocket and placed the recorder on the table. Then he pressed play. Their own voices filled the room. Every word, every lie, every plan. Sophia's face turned pale. Alex looked as if the ground had disappeared beneath him. When the recording ended, the silence felt heavier than anything before. Daniel looked at both of them. His voice was calm, but cold. You were right about one thing, he said. You thought blindness meant I couldn't see. He paused. But sometimes, people reveal their true faces when they believe no one is watching. Sophia tried to speak. Daniel, I can explain. No, Daniel interrupted. You already did. He gestured toward the recorder. The truth was already there. And now, so were the consequences. The silence that followed the recording felt heavier than anything Daniel Carter had ever experienced. The dining room, once filled with casual conversation and morning routines, now felt like a courtroom where the verdict had already been decided. Sophia and Alex sat frozen. Neither of them expected this moment. Neither of them had prepared for it. For weeks, they had believed Daniel was helpless, blind, dependent. But now he stood across the room, looking directly at them with calm, steady eyes. The illusion they had relied on was gone. Sophia was the first to speak. Her voice trembled. Daniel, listen. This isn't what it looks like. Daniel almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the excuse sounded so familiar. People always said the same thing when they were caught. This isn't what it looks like. Daniel slowly walked back to the table and sat down. His movements were controlled, deliberate. The same calm confidence that had built billion-dollar companies now filled the room. Alex finally found his voice. Big brother, we didn't mean... Daniel raised his hand. That single gesture silenced him immediately. For several seconds, Daniel said nothing. He simply looked at them, studying their faces. The same faces he had trusted for years. Sophia's makeup could not hide the fear in her eyes. Alex looked pale, his confidence completely gone. The people who once believed they were in control now looked like strangers. Daniel finally spoke. You know what hurts the most? He he said quietly. Neither Sophia nor Alex answered. Daniel continued. It's not the money. He leaned back in his chair. I've built companies before. If I lost everything tomorrow, I could build it again. His voice remained calm, but every word carried weight. What hurts is realizing that the two people I trusted most in the world were planning to destroy me. Sophia lowered her head. Daniel, please. No, Daniel interrupted. For weeks you stood beside me while I believed my life had changed forever. He gestured toward his eyes. You helped me walk. You helped me eat. You told me everything would be okay. His voice hardened slightly, all while laughing behind my back. Sophia's eyes filled with tears, but Daniel no longer felt sympathy, not after hearing the truth with his own ears. Alex finally spoke again. Daniel, I was wrong. I made a mistake. Daniel looked at him slowly. A mistake? Alex nodded quickly. Yes, I got carried away. Daniel shook his head. No, Alex. That wasn't a mistake. He leaned forward slightly. A mistake is making a bad decision once. What you did was a plan. Alex had no answer. Daniel continued calmly. You discussed how to steal my companies. You discussed transferring my assets. You discussed how easy it was to fool me. The words hung in the air like heavy stones. Sophia wiped her tears. Daniel, we can fix this. Daniel looked at her with a quiet disbelief. Fix it? She nodded quickly. Yes. We'll make things right. I promise. Daniel studied her face. For years he had believed he understood her. But now he realized something important. He had never truly known her at all. Finally, Daniel stood up. Let me show you something. Sophia and Alex watched nervously as Daniel walked toward the large window overlooking the city. The skyline stretched across the horizon, filled with the buildings Daniel's companies had helped construct. Daniel looked at the view for a moment before speaking. Do you know why I became successful? Neither of them answered. Daniel turned back toward them. It wasn't luck. It wasn't intelligence. It was understanding people. He walked slowly back to the table. In business, the most dangerous mistake you can make is trusting the wrong person. He paused. And unfortunately, that's exactly what I did. Sophia began crying softly, but Daniel's voice remained steady. You both believed blindness made me weak. You believed it gave you control. Then Daniel reached into his jacket and placed several documents on the table. Legal documents. Signed. Official. Alex stared at them. What is this? Daniel spoke calmly. While you were busy planning how to take my empire, I was protecting it. Sophia's eyes widened. What do you mean? Daniel crossed his arms. Every company ownership has already been secured. Every asset has been transferred into protected trusts. Every financial decision now requires approval from people who answer directly to me. Alex's face went pale. You can't do that. Daniel raised an eyebrow. I already did. The room fell silent again. Everything Sophia and Alex had been planning was now impossible. Their entire scheme had collapsed before it even began. Daniel looked at both of them one final time. There is only one thing left to discuss. Sophia looked up slowly. What? Daniel's voice was calm, but final. You're leaving. Sophia froze. What? This house, Daniel said quietly. This life. This world, none of it belongs to you anymore. Alex stood up suddenly. You can't just throw us out. Daniel looked at him. I can. He pointed toward the door. And I am. For several seconds, no one moved. Then Sophia stood slowly. Her face showed a mixture of fear, regret, and disbelief. She had married a billionaire. She had lived in luxury. She had believed she could control everything. Now, it was all gone. Alex looked at Daniel one last time. Daniel, please. But Daniel said nothing. The decision had already been made. Finally, Sophia and Alex walked toward the door. Step by step. The sound of the door closing echoed through the mansion. And just like that, they were gone. Daniel stood alone in the dining room. The silence returned, but this time it felt different. He walked slowly back to the window and looked out over the city once more. The betrayal still hurt. It probably always would. But Daniel had learned something important. Money attracts many people. Success attracts even more. But loyalty, true loyalty, is rare. And sometimes the hardest lessons in life come from the people we trust the most. But Daniel Carter was still standing, still strong, still capable of building anything he wanted, because in the end, the greatest wealth he possessed was not money. It was the wisdom gained from seeing the truth.